Reality shifting is like walking through a garden that isn't yours, but one that you are relatively familiar with, but you don't have it memorized. And all of a sudden, you see a new statue, or you see that the landscaper has come. At least that is your narrative, that is your explanation. Because you notice that some of the bushes are sculpted into what appears to be rabbit ears. Or you notice that there's other bushes that you haven't seen before, but they don't look recently planted. Alternatively, you're driving in your neighborhood, and your neighborhood gym, all of these I observed, by the way, your neighborhood gym is suddenly closed. But you're not a member there, and so you didn't know about this process. And so you assume that there's no reality shifting, that this is just part of businesses opening and closing. And you continue on, and you're driving around, and all of a sudden you see businesses that you know are extinct. Or you see old-fashioned logos on signs, and you think to yourself, this is a major top 5 food brand. Why does it suddenly look like their sign hasn't been updated since the 70s? Or you'll notice vastly different styles. But because you're not in the know of what is happening to these places, somebody who is reality shifting but doesn't know it will likely either not observe those phenomenon, or they will, and then they will discard it into the bucket of logic and rationality. And what I have discovered fairly consistently is that there is an order to the nature of the universe, and parallel realities are ordered in such a way that they're very consistent, which kind of makes sense if you think about it. In that it's like a map layered on top of a map with a certain percentage, I call it a gradient percentage of change, that unless you are open to observing it, you might be completely blind to. Like in the last segment when I talked about Anil Seth's presentation, Dr. Seth, where he went into change blindness. And if you have change blindness, you could be looking at a scene that is changing, but your cognition makes you see it the same because that's what you're expecting. And so for many people, they can reality shift unknowingly as a collective or as a group. And this is what I personally believe the Mandela effect is. And then they end up in a place where all of a sudden they have memories of styles of brands or products or things like that that either never existed, or there's a major discrepancy. And then they're looking at this thing called the Mandela effect. Some people are alive, some people are dead. It's named after Nelson Mandela. Apparently there's a big disagreement about when and how he died. And so this phenomenon is named after him to represent this disagreement in space and in time between groups of people. And this is what reality shifting is like. It's like you wake up and everything looks the same. You're in the same life that you've always been. So you think, so you expect. Except that there are random things that are out of order. But your life is not thrown into chaos. And I believe that, and this is because of some secret number in the universe, like the Fibonacci sequence, or this is just intuition. I'm not talking as a scientist here, but there's something about the order of the universe that keeps the fractal arrangements in a configuration to where it makes sense. And as you are traveling through space and time, you flow through these fractal arrangements where there's a tiny bit of gradient difference between parallel worlds, but not usually unless you really start trying to quantum travel. And I've done it, and it's hard. Like the micro shifts are much easier to teach people. The major jumps are very, very, wow, mind-blowing. Really, really mind-blowing, but very disorienting at the same time. So I believe that normally when we are quantum shifting or reality shifting, we flow through these gradients, and we have to train our perceptual system and our sensory system, pretty much the same thing, but it's kind of different. We have to process the sensory information differently, and we have to tune our sensory systems to be upregulated, and we have to select for the saliency of certain KPIs or certain things that might indicate that we're shifting. So let me say it differently. If you were reality shifting, how would you know? What are some things that you could keep an eye out for that might indicate to you that you are shifting? This would be things that are out of order, things that are out of place, things that suddenly disappear and reappear, or things that don't make sense. I call these incongruencies, things that are outside your expectation. So, for example, seeing a craft sign, major company, right? And seeing this in the 2020s, knowing that branding is critically important. I mean, these companies live off of branding, right? And so the style of their signage is regulated. One of my first management jobs, and I was 19, 20 years old, was retail management. And I got instructions on exactly how to place things in this vitamin store. And they were rigid about it. And the signage was updated every 6 months, and it was done nationwide, and it's a thing, right? Like there are teams of people that actually dictate this, because the branding awareness for the consumer is what feeds into the advertising machine. And so it's not like, oh, maybe they just, left us, maybe it was just a franchise. And even that, like opens up some questions, because franchises are also, they live off of the branding, and so to have like this random warehouse from a top 5 food company with this sign that looks so outdated, so surprising that it registers as what I call an incongruency, meaning a what is that? Same thing with a computer store. I'm like, CompUSA is gone where I'm from. It's like dial-up is gone where I'm from. And Saturn, the car company, is gone where I'm from. And then all of a sudden I'm seeing Saturn dealerships. And I'm like, this is impossible. And so there are things like that. Like one of my favorite KPIs became the octane level of gas, because I came from a place that even my Audi, I don't want to go into the details now, but I came from a place that had higher octane gas that I couldn't find. And all I could find for my car was like the bare minimum. So when you opened up the little plate on my gas cover, it says the preferred octane for like premium, right? That it preferred. I couldn't find it, which was 95. Isn't that amazing? How is it possible that my car that was old, I bought it used. It was, it doesn't matter. And in the reality layer that I purchased it, it preferred 95 octane gas that suddenly I couldn't find it anywhere. Literally, I still haven't found it. If you would exist in a place with 95, wow, I need to come and visit you. Because all I found was like 94. And then I started seeing 89 again. And then you're like, okay, well, maybe all the gas stations just collectively decided to reconfigure their gas. I don't know. I'm not part of this product network, right? It could be true. It could be true of all of the things that we look at globally, right? And this is why the next point of successfully reality shifting is to be in flow. and to be in a flow state. And this means that you have to allow for a certain level of ambiguity, because the realities want to flow to you, but it is your cognition that will override it and snap you back to a baseline reality that you're trying to shift away from, especially if you are heavily logical and rational and regimented in space and time. You can still do micro shifts being tied to a schedule and a routine. That is what I'm doing now in my day-to-day. But there's no way you can do the big jumps. No way. I've lived it. I know it. I'm going to talk about that separately. But the fluidity of flowing in and out of different reality layers that are in close proximity to you requires you to not be hypervigilant and requires you to be in a flow state. So it's excellent if you are a natural meditator. But if you are constantly looking at the clock or looking for something that you've misplaced and obsessively trying to find it, this is going to be a barrier to you shifting reality. Because what happens is that it's like such a delicate process where you can just drift in between one layer and another. And it's like you have to be cool about it. You have to be really cool, because I still get frustrated when I'm like, where is my phone? Where did I put it? I've lost my phone for hours at a time, days at a time. Okay, not days, but an entire day. And when I was doing some heavy shifting, and that really freaked me out, because that was like my personal handheld communication device that connected me with everything. And I was like out driving around, and like, how do you book an Airbnb if you can't get your phone, right? So I know there are other options, but the point is that you have to allow for things to be misplaced, and you have to be careful about your narratives. You have to be careful about how you interpret those events. And very importantly, you have to allow for reality to reveal itself to you and flow in tandem with it. So for example, I also lost my car a couple times during some really big shifts, very disconcerting. And the roads changed too, so I got like locked in this little neighborhood, and this was kind of a nightmare realm. And anyway, so I had to sleep on the street, literally in somebody's backyard. That night, I was really cold, so I curled up on somebody's porch couch, and they called the cops on me, and thankfully they were really nice. But they were really freaked out because they woke up and there was this strange woman sleeping on their back deck, curled up on their couch. I tried to sleep on the ground in like this grassy area that was in a circle, you know, the road, how it kind of circles. Anyway, like a cul-de-sac, and it had a little island in the middle of it. So it was a cul-de-sac, but with a little island. And I tried to sleep in the little island, but it was so cold that I needed to try to keep myself warm. And I didn't have a lot of body fat at that time, which was another interesting phenomenon which occurred. And so I made my way to somebody's house, and I was shifting in and out and pretty intensely. And finally I slept on their couch. And then the cop tried to take me to the last place that I remembered where my car was, but it took me another half day. He took me to the shopping center, but it took me another half day to find it and to locate it. And I had some really amazing experiences meeting people on the journey. And so it's really important when you're doing like really big traveling to just be cool and to flow with it. And that's why being a meditator helps. But when you do quantum meditation, this is where it's really important for you to get into a flow state while you're driving or while you're walking, because I find that movement really helps when you're trying to make shift events happen. Now I'm at a point where I can do micro shifts in my day-to-day routine in my house, and it's not an issue, right? But during some heavy shift times for medium to big shifts, movement is really powerful. And so being able to meditate and get your brain waves in a particular orientation, and I do believe there is a specific brainwave pattern to be able to do this, but I'm not sure entirely, so don't hold me to that. But definitely for big jumps. But for the micro jumps, being in a flow state seems to be enough, and losing track of space and time. So hopefully you are familiar with the flow state. Others have covered it. It's kind of a buzzword in mainstream culture. Athletes get into flow state, artists get into flow state, meditators get into flow state. It's essentially the losing the orientation of space and time. And then very deep flow states, you'll lose the sense of self. And this is very conducive for reality shifting. But you need to be able to sometimes walk or drive. And so I like to create quantum playlists to help facilitate. There's a certain feel. I have one. If you want to listen to it, you can reach out and let me know. It's on Spotify, but it's private right now. And it has a certain vibe and a certain rhythm to it that helps me get into a flow state when I'm driving. And so whatever tool you use to meditate and walk, music, it can be another type of meditation that's very powerful for releasing your sense of space and time, where you can just like go aimless and just be like, I'm just going to go out and I'm just going to see the world and I'm going to let it change. And I'm going to be excited by the change. I'm going to be cool with the change. Because what I've observed is that I was riding in a car with a friend of mine. I observed that we were going through some slip space events. I'll talk about slip space in future recordings, but we were reality shifting. Strange things were happening with technology, with the map. Very typical, by the way. Great KPI. GPS gets weird. When you do bigger jumps, bank transfers get delayed. So do POS systems, credit cards don't work. It's a thing. Gas pumps won't work. So I advise you, if you're trying to do some really big shifts, to have cash if you're still in a cash society. Because there were a couple times I got stranded because the card wouldn't work. I mean, it was just ludicrous at some point, and my card got eaten at another point, and then I really got stranded. And anyway, so cash is your friend if you're doing big quantum leaps. But just for everyday stuff, you will find that if you listen to the radio, this is another great KPI, it's like all of a sudden new channels will come in that you've never heard of, and you're not scanning the radio, but you're just driving along and then you're listening to your favorite station, and then all of a sudden it's like shh, and then it's Chinese and it's like music from India and you're like, this really happened. You're like, what? I'm in Dallas, Texas. I'm in the most like Texas part of Texas. maybe Tejano, right? I totally expect that. That would be a congruency to have Tejano, but to have like this Middle Eastern Indian jive music, Bollywood, come through your radio station, or to suddenly have people speaking in Chinese, these are really big incongruencies. Or to be in a major metropolis area and then to lose signal whatsoever. It's another great tell. Or if you're driving out in Yosemite area or Joshua Tree, those are really great hotspots. Death Valley National Park. There are no radio stations except for like one or two. And then they'll have a sign that says, for information, go to AM, and then you'll go to that and it doesn't exist. But there's two other ones that do exist. And it's really fun. Like once you get to experience things like that, you'll see discrepancies in prices and products that are available. So, gas stations, easy in and out places are also great indicators of where you're at because you'll notice themes in the products that are available and also in the feel of things. Anyway, so by being in a flow state, you can receive these incongruencies and you can allow them to happen. Unlike my friend, when we were driving and going through these shift events, he was bugging out about the discrepancies on the map. And he was like, technology and da da da. And he was like forcing it, he was like trying to refresh it. And he was like, he wasn't in flow. He was like, I don't understand why it's not working. Let me try to, and that sort of forcing mentality, when you lose connection with space and time in the presence of incongruencies or in the presence of things that don't make sense to you, like technology not working properly, that's when it's most imperative to roll with it and to just flow with it. And similarly, I remember a time that I was in Dallas and I was getting my beloved car, my Quantum Companion, oil change and things like that. And I went to a new mechanic and I was in the mechanic's waiting room. And this was a challenging moment for me where the person who owned the place, great person. I don't even remember the name of the mechanic's name, but they had been around apparently for a long time. But I didn't know about them, but I wouldn't have because I had never really looked them up before. And they weren't part of my usual circuit. So this is a great opportunity that if you are going to shift in your own neighborhood to go to a business that you're not really familiar with and allow for a new reality to present itself to you. So in the lobby area, the owner and this other woman were talking about mail order robots that you could use for, I'm going to keep this PG, you could use for intimate relations. And they were talking about it like this was already on the market. And my understanding was that it had AI integration. Now, this is a big deal from where I'm from, which didn't have this. And my understanding was that it could come on the market, but it was far off into the future, like several years into the future. And then we all started having a conversation about the ethics of when they become sentient and how they should be treated when they start demanding rights. And then having this ethics conversation about having robots delivered to your house and in your home and serving you, and what happens when they become people. Mind-blowing, right? And I haven't looked to know if the reality layer that I'm in has that capability. This was a while ago, several years ago in Dallas, Texas, but for me, from where I was used to, this was a really, really big deal. And so by flowing with conversations, by letting newness come and being like, oh, I'm just going to join the conversation like I've known this entire time. It's kind of like being in a foreign country when you're learning the language. At first, it's like you're processing it receptively, but before you can talk expressively, you're nodding along because there's a part of you that's understanding, but you're still figuring it out at the same time. So that's what happens when you reality shift and you start talking to other people. You're like, yeah, oh, and then you join the conversation and then you figure it out as you go along. So another great way, by the way, is talking to other reality shifters, which is one of the big parts of what I offer in my one-on-one coaching. And right now I have 2 spots open. So if you're interested in shifting together and flowing together and practicing, this is a powerful way to do it. I have been on the phone with people while I've been shifting and have heard the line go dead. And then we come back and it's like almost like we're picking up a different conversation thread. It's been pretty wild. So if you're up for the journey and along for the ride, then email me sacredjourneyproductions@gmail.com.